In this section, we're going to talk about feeling ready and how do you know when you're ready to perform? And that's such a great question that people ask me all the time. And I'm going to give you an example from one of my own students who had been working with me for several months, and she was so ready to go teach her first class. I could see it, and she had been studying and acing all the tests, and she just was letting fear stop her and didn't want to do it. And finally, I was like, Hannah, get your butt out there and teach. The only thing stopping you is you. And she called me up later and she said, Sarah, you're so right. It was actually easy and I had fun and I just shouldn't let fear stop me. So if you're watching this, you shouldn't let fear stop you either. She was just worried about failing, which of course she didn't.
And the faster you fail, the quicker you succeed. This is a quote that most successful people would probably agree with, and I personally do agree with. I think that the important note here is that you are learning from your failures or your mistakes, and so that you can continue to expand and obviously not make the same mistake twice, and you really can look at the situation and have perspective. So instead of saying, oh my God, I messed it up and the this and the that, it goes, okay, this went wrong and this is something I can do to prevent that or change that from going wrong in the future. And if you can keep those learning experience as the key point of your failures, then you are going to learn so quick and you're going to continue to expand. So I think that failure is a small price to pay for the potential benefits that you can learn. And that's why I have so much to share with you on this e-course, because I have failed so many times in my career and I have made notes and have improved because of those failures or those mistakes.
And you are not alone. We both have. So that's why we want to help you guys learn from our mistakes so that you don't have to make the same ones.
Exactly. Exactly. And try to avoid them for some bigger shows or whatever events may come your way. That also being said, it's nice to start with shows that are less detrimental, so maybe they don't carry as much weight. If you don't have as much pressure on your back, you'll probably be a little bit more open to performing in a way that feels more natural. You'll still have your nerves, but you may not lose an opportunity. Anytime you're doing a show, especially for another company, entertainment company, or even a client, you're basically auditioning whether you know it or not. So it is good to be able to show a really good first impression in those cases. But there are events like street fairs or public kind of events where you're brought in as a guest dancer or a performer on someone else's show, and those are a little bit less detrimental and will still build your nerves and give you that experience of performing, but take some of the weight off of the situation. And there are also, those are really good opportunities to start to learn how to develop your actual performance technique, which is different than your technique as an entertainer, whether it be hooping or vocal or stilting. You actually can start to really develop, how do I get a response out of a crowd? What is working? What isn't working? And if it continues to not work in different crowds, well, then maybe you should change that or do it differently so that when you hit the big stage, you are ready. Any opportunity that comes your way, you don't have to second guess. So get started now so you can be ready for that opportunity.
Totally. Baby steps the way to go, so that way you don't feel you're going to freak out on your first gig.
Exactly.
Great point.
Exactly, because freezing up can happen. Any mistake or failure can happen, and we already expressed how to move through that a little bit, and we'll go through that in more detail. I would suggest going with smaller crowds first. I think this is actually a little bit more nerve-wracking. Sarah said sometimes it's easier when you know people. I prefer not knowing people, so that's obviously depends on your personality. But what I do like about small crowds is that you're pretty much forced to see people eye to eye, and learning how to relate and not be afraid to continue to do your skill and see people as a human face to face is probably one of the quickest routes to becoming a really good entertainer. And we're talking about the art of entertainment, not necessarily going, look what I can do, but really engaging with people. So smaller crowds is a big piece of advice, I would say, if you're getting started.
Totally. And in fact, a lot of people, like Adelaide said, she feels like it's a little bit scarier to do a smaller crowd, and that's because you're being vulnerable. You're actually looking into another person's eyes, and that can be terrifying. But that's the beauty of performing, is that you get to connect with people, and if you don't have that vulnerability, you don't get that connection.
Exactly, and we'll share more about that on setting the stage. It is equally important to note that as you put yourself out there and you do feel ready and you start performing, you are essentially starting to represent yourself. And you're always representing yourself in day-to-day life, but as soon as you put yourself in the spotlight, that's amplified. So you do want to be aware of that you're essentially branding what you do, and you're starting to promote. Whether you have business cards or not, people may ask for your information or not, depending on your act. So you want to have some of the essential things down. You want to have at least enough technique that you feel confident. Confidence, the key word. You don't need to be the best or have the craziest skills, but if you don't feel confident doing what you're doing, then that's going to translate, and you probably won't be representing yourself in the way that would pave your path towards being a professional entertainer. You want to be able to embody your skill and to be present with it, and you want to be able to be safe. So safety first, although I mentioned it last. If you're doing fire and if you're doing stilt walking, nobody wants to see somebody who looks like they're really about to hurt themselves. And that being said, you don't want to hurt yourself. But if you feel that you are safe and you've got some performance technique under your belt, and the only thing keeping you from doing what you want to be doing, which is performing, then I would say throw yourself to the lions, go out there and do it, and if worst comes to worst, you can imagine the audience in their underwear. Which never really seemed to work for me, but whatever works for you, just get your butt out there. Sometimes you've got to say yes to things maybe 2 months before, and as soon as it gets there, you're like, why did I say yes? Why did I say yes? But saying yes and doing things once you feel you've got those initial toolkit with you is definitely a piece of advice worth taking.
Indeed. In fact, if I waited until I felt ready before I ever set foot on the stage, I would have never done it. The truth is, you can start now right where you're at. You don't need $1 million. You don't need a special performance certificate. You can take the skills you have now, polish them, use the confidence exercises that I'm going to share with you in the next section, and get out there and perform and share with people and connect.
Exactly. And the only thing that actually makes you a professional entertainer, as soon as you get your first paid gig, then you are a professional. You don't need a certificate. You don't need anything like that. And I would say feeling ready as a professional does have to do with getting that first pay check or even tip. Quick story, before I moved out here, I was still in high school, and my sister invited me to come and belly dance at a private party, and I was so afraid. I was thinking, I'm going to California, and nobody, that's near Hollywood, and I'm from Texas, so I was, making this huge assumption that I wasn't ready or good enough. Well, they tipped me $100 bill, and I was like 17 years old, okay? So I was like,
Wow.
Oh my God, and that was so encouraging that it actually made me feel ready. So if you are not taking money because you don't feel ready, you're kind of slowing down your own process. So I'll leave you with that note, and also say that if you're so afraid and you're really preventing yourself, just think, what is the worst thing that can happen? And imagine yourself moving past that point. And I can almost guarantee you what you're afraid of failing at, or whatever is preventing you, is so much easier than you are making it in your head. So if you don't believe me, then try it for yourself.